Salutations YouTube, Gavin, coming at you from my Marxist indoctrination chamber, and today I'm going to be talking about the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which I will henceforth refer to as the Compact to cut a good 5 minutes off of this video. So first things first, what is the Compact? Well, to understand that, we need some context. You'll recall that the United States picks its president through a system wherein each state is given a number of votes equal to its combined number of senators and representatives, and are free to allocate their electors as they wish. 48 states simply give all of their electoral votes to whoever won the most votes in that state, regardless of the margin. This is how we can end up with a president who wins the election without the popular vote. Winning the state by any margin is equally valid, so a map of votes that looks like this can very easily become this. Now, amending the Constitution is a difficult process that in this case will require many states to vote against their own self-interest, so any reform to this system is going to happen at the state level. 2 states currently allocate their electors semi-proportionally by awarding some to the winner of the state and one to whoever won each district. But for most states, this isn't much of an option, because functionally, all they would be doing is giving a few votes to the party that is a minority within that state, and increasing the odds of upsetting their own voters by possibly using their power to hand a national election to said minority party. More clearly stated, if Maryland, which usually votes for Democrats by around a 2-to-1 margin, were to give a third of its electoral votes to Republicans, and the election were close enough to make that decision matter, it wouldn't really do anything except get the people who wrote that rule voted out of office. Hell, it wouldn't even get Maryland much more attention, because the thing about proportional votes is that they're proportional. So a candidate would need to flip an entire district in order to gain a single electoral vote, whereas by getting 50,000 more votes in neighboring Pennsylvania, they could win 20. Proportional electors only work if every state does them, and there is no mechanism by which the US can force states to change their policies. However, there is a mechanism by which the states have some power that, whilst requiring a large block of them to work together, is far closer to reality than either proportional electors or abolishing the Electoral College altogether. Enter the Compact. The Compact is an agreement between states who sign it to allocate all of their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote nationwide, regardless of individual state results. It would not go into effect until ratified enough states to give the signatories a combined voting power of at least 270 electoral votes. But should they have such power, the president would be functionally elected by the popular vote so long as the coalition holds together, without needing to change the Constitution at all. So, it's a perfect solution, but how feasible is it really? Although a cakewalk compared to the need to amend the Constitution, having a coalition of 270 electoral votes is still pretty difficult due to political reality. In theory, because the Electoral College works primarily to the benefit of states with close races, one would expect getting the voting power to be fairly easy. If you add up the electoral vote tallies of every state that has voted the same way since 2000, you get 347 electoral votes. But as of the making of this video, only 196 electoral votes are currently held by signatories, with 98 more being held by states that are pending bills on compact membership. So, what's going on here? This is where we acknowledge parties exist. At present, the Electoral College seems to primarily benefit the Republican Party, and the prospect of popular will overturned in favor of a Democrat seems somewhat laughable. So to many residents of deep red states, all they would be doing is making sure that whenever popular vote and Electoral College conflict, that they would be helping the Democrat get elected. It's debatable how long this state of affairs will last. An analysis by Nate Silver shows that over time, the Electoral College does not consistently advance either party, and that from a statistical perspective, popular electoral splits are just as likely to favor Democrats as Republicans. But due to the rarity of said splits and how they happen to occur in situations where they've benefited the Republican, residents of red states are going to need some convincing. They will need to be convinced that the benefits they get from increased relevance to their state, as well as the more equitable distribution of power on the whole, will outweigh the occasional disadvantage that comes their way when a popular vote is chosen over the electoral vote in the event of a split. Personally, I believe this case can be made to enough people to potentially start to get red states on board with the idea, but getting a large number of people on the right to agree to something doesn't guarantee that they will be galvanized enough to actually push for it. And some push it will require, because it's very doubtful that Republican donors and leadership are going to open up to the idea. And additionally, interest in the issue seems to spike around election time and dwindle in between, so there would need to be a catalyst. The only thing that would realistically get Republicans pushing their state leaders on the issue would probably be a Democratic candidate winning the presidency without the popular vote. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. But if that happened, wouldn't most Democrats change their tune on the issue? And the answer is honestly no. People who spend an awful lot of time thinking about processes like this generally aren't that short-sighted or opportunistic. I'm not trying to insinuate that Republicans are. Simply put, the movement to change anything will start with the people screwed over by it. The ones who benefit from it will probably remain fairly inactive unless they're given a catalyst. When can we expect to see this happen? Well, probably not for a while, just because of how rare splits are and the fact that at present it does seem that they're more than likely to favor the Republican. Having said that, I do not believe that the present dynamic is perennial. We often think of political divides, especially in the context of the electoral college, as being between the rural and the urban. However, it's worth noting that America as a country is 79% urban, and only 4 states are majority rural. Where the political divide is one-dimensional, as is often insinuated, and were urban centers the monoliths as which they're often portrayed, the electoral college would have no capacity to protect the interests of rural Americans. There are massive differences in interests even within cities that may be hard to really understand from looking at a map. But a store clerk employee in South Chicago and a small business owner in Pilsen have less in common than a corn farmer in Iowa and a wheat farmer in Wyoming. Although we can be relatively certain that nothing is changing anytime soon, if the compact were to go into effect, would it be allowed to remain? And furthermore, would it last? The long and short of it is that opponents of the plan point to the prohibition on compacts and agreements between states, whereas proponents point to the fact that enforcing this rule within this context would infringe on the rights of states to allocate their electors as they wish. From my low information angle, it does seem like the proponents of this plan have a more solid argument. And even if this particular compact isn't allowed, I can see other ways of writing the law that simply reframe it as something other than a compact. But again, I'm sure plenty of people who know a lot more about this than I do would be happy to discuss this in the comments. In all likelihood, it will probably come down to the ideological configuration of the Supreme Court in the aftermath of the first election during which the compact is valid. A bitter pill to swallow for many state legislatures is that this agreement will inevitably result in a state using its electoral votes in accordance with national rather than local will, which is why I've seen people assert that the agreement will be unable to remain in effect after an election, because the political fallout from that reality will lead to a withdrawal of essential states from the compact. This, however, ignores the aforementioned inertia. Just as the pattern of interest in reforming the Electoral College only comes in force in the immediate aftermath of elections, so too will the pushes to leave the compact. If, for example, the state of Colorado gave all 9 of its electoral votes to who did not win a majority in that state, the people who may have an issue with this could theoretically be equal in number to those who supported the losing presidential candidate. However, due to how margins tend to not be very large and how easily people tend to move on, it's improbable that within the 2 years between federal and state elections, a movement that includes withdrawal from the compact as a major part of their campaign would retain any traction. In addition to this, it would assume a situation in which Colorado's 9 votes will make all the difference, which isn't impossible given that signatories do tend to trend towards one party, as we've discussed before, but it's fairly unlikely. I have no doubt that the compact could fall apart under some circumstances. If defenders of the Electoral College are correct and politicians only campaign in a handful of cities and states, thus managing to win the national vote, whilst losing by substantial margins in many signatory states, it is very likely that some withdrawals may follow even immediately. But barring that, it should hold up, assuming it becomes reality and doesn't get struck down by the courts. Well, those were my thoughts on the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which are 5 words that I probably won't be saying again anytime soon. If you like this video and would like to see more, or maybe better produced ones, you can check out my Patreon in the description. Also, remember to subscribe and such, but only if you actually like the video. I'm not a fan of dead subscribers. I've probably gone long enough, so bye!